Right. So, welcome to the Vedic Health Collective. My name is Narayani Dasi. I'm going to be your host for today. And with me is the beautiful and amazing Narayani Devi Dasi, the founder of Golden Healing Arts. So, Narayani Devi Dasi, I wanted to first ask if you could just introduce yourself a little bit, just kind of share with everyone about who you are, though I know many people know who you are already, but because I mean, you've been traveling around the world, doing so many wonderful, amazing things, hosting kirtans, doing sound healings. So I know people from kind of across the pond know who you are as well. But for those that may not know, to please just kindly introduce yourself, and also just what's kind of brought you not only into being a healer, but also what perhaps has brought you into Krishna consciousness itself.
Okay. Well, first off, Dandavat Pranams. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And for everyone who is tuning in. So my name is Narayani Dasi, and yeah, so a little bit about me. In a nutshell, I dived into the yoga path in around 2013, 14. I became a yoga instructor. And as I went on my journey as a yoga instructor is when I also changed my diet to becoming plant-based, and made a lot of shifts in my life, cutting out toxic association and things like that. And that led me to meeting some devotees, some yoga teachers that are also devotees in Miami, that are now my god brothers and sisters. But at the time, they were just some people I knew. And through their association, I was invited to kirtans and programs. Srila BV Vana Maharaj was one of the first Maharajas I met. And just kind of started being really attracted to the Bhakti yoga process. Made a lot of shifts in my life around that time. Even my relationship, I decided to let go because I wanted a more devotional lifestyle. And then I was managing a yoga studio in Miami called Synergy Yoga, who's also, the owner is also a devotee, actually your god sister. Her name is Attutement Dasi. She's a disciple of Srila Bhakti Narayani Goswami Maharaj.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of Bhakti energy in that studio. So I was very happy to be managing it. And one day, Vichitri told me that she was out of town, and she told me there was a Swami coming to preach and that I needed to decorate the room, make it really nice. And she told me how to like flowers and what to do with the incense and everything like that. And so basically I prepared the room for my own guru without knowing. So my guru, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Vana Maharaj, he came, and it was a small group, just about maybe 10 people. And I was just so attracted to his mood, his smile, his energy. At the time, I didn't really understand much, but it was just something in my heart that was very, very much attracted. And I knew that one of the students that would come to this yoga studio was a disciple of him. So I asked her, and I said, her name is Anu Vilas Manjari Dasi. And I asked her, and I said, I want a spiritual name. And at the time, it was kind of more like I just wanted to have a spiritual name for a yoga teacher, you know, to kind of be in the trend.
Right.
I didn't really know what I was getting myself into at the time, but he gave me actually Harinam and Japa beads and my Tulsi beads, which they recently just broke. That's why I'm not wearing them. But I will be getting some soon.
Mine broke too. Mine broke actually on Thursday.
Oh, yes. I need to do more bhakti. That's the side. So basically, yes, so I received all of that, and it took about 6 months for me to fully integrate what this really meant for me in my life. But then he came again and visited at the end of the year, and that was when I really got to immerse myself in programs, like with my own guru, because I only saw him that one time, the first time. And being around devotees and really listening to Hari Katha and ecstatic kirtan and everything like that, and experiencing the mood with devotees. And basically from then, it's just been a journey of just meeting more and more association, and traveling to India and parikram with my Gurudev and meeting Srimati Shamrani Didi and serving her so closely. And my story is a little, I'm going to write a book. It's definitely a journey, but maybe too much for this call right now. But basically it all led me to be closer in association, to be part of the family. And that's kind of how I got into the Bhakti Yoga path. And what led me as well into healing arts. First off, I like to consider myself more as a conduit, more as a practitioner, rather than the word healer, because something I've learned in the practice is that most of the time, the person that is open and willing to receive the healing, whatever healing modality it is actually the one doing the healing themselves, and they're just being open to receive. And me as the conduit in the middle is providing that medium for them to receive that transmission. But I try to keep it neutral. So that's one way I look at it. But I dived into that path through the yoga practice. I wanted to have extra modalities to offer my students. I would give some energy work at the end of the yoga session in their shavasana to make them feel really nice. And I wanted to learn properly. Basically, when I got into Reiki, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about today, was because I started to go into Reiki circles, Reiki and sound healing circle events, and I really liked it. And one day I was invited to a Reiki circle from a Reiki master who was actually kind of famous for what he does. He's been on Oprah. He had miraculous healings with people. And so I was very curious. And I went, and it was actually very different than the healing circles I've been in. This was an older crowd, more like 50, 60 years old. Normally in healing sessions, people are laying down and there's like candles and relaxing music. This was like in an auditorium, everyone's sitting on a seat, and it was a bunch of older people. So when I walked in, I felt a little awkward because I was the youngest person in the room. And I also felt a lot of suffering in the room the minute I walked in. I felt an overwhelming urge to want to help rather than receive. And so I felt like very uncomfortable being there, but I did my best to just be present. But I think the Reiki master noticed I was a little antsy and like opening my eyes, because I really just felt like I didn't deserve healing in that moment. I felt like I wanted to help. And I think he caught on to that, because he came up to me out of nowhere and he's like, "Give me your hands, like put your hands out." And I was like, okay. And then he did some symbols on my hands, which I found out later was a Reiki attunement. And he's like, "Go." And I was like, "Go what?" And he's like, go help, go heal. And I was like, "But I don't know what I'm doing." And he's like, "Yes, you do." And I was like, okay. So I started going around the room and just being intuitive from my heart and channeling. And the end result was a lot of catharticism, a lot of people really having deep healing, and a lot of feedback from people I worked on who said they felt lots of heat in my hands and lots of good energy. And from then is when I decided to really pursue the path of Reiki. Even though the Reiki master already attuned me, I wanted to learn properly. And so I actually looked for a training and worked with a different Reiki master. And that is kind of how I started my journey with becoming a Reiki practitioner. That was around 2017. And then I got my Reiki master's in 2020.
Great. That's amazing. That's awesome. I think it's beautiful that you initially started out in yoga, and then eventually pursuing your yoga teacher training. And that, just kind of navigating through all of that, is what allowed you and opened up the door for you to be able to then meet your spiritual master, which is beautiful. Like, I think sometimes that is sort of what happens, is when people just get attracted to the yoga community. Then it's not to say that, books are not going out, or spiritual masters and preachers are not going out to other circles too. But generally speaking, the yoga community is so vast, and in terms of being able to offer kirtan and sound healing and all of these varieties. And that was an avenue for you to be able to meet your ultimate calling into Krishna consciousness. So just how amazing. And then just also circling back to what you mentioned about, the Reiki attunement, which I do want to ask about in more detail, but just you sharing about how this was sort of a calling for you to want to help others as opposed to wanting to receive healing. I think, and also something else you said too was that you consider yourself a conduit, as in like a medium, as in, a neutral party that is acting like a channel, but the ultimate healing is coming from the person itself who is receiving all of it. They're basically put in the driver's seat, which is interesting, because in my field too, that's kind of how we want to see our patients is, let's put you in the driver's seat of your healthcare. But it's beautiful that you almost remove yourself to some degree. You're there to be able to coach, to guide, to mentor, but then you're almost taking yourself out of it to some degree in order to allow that person to flourish. Mm-hmm. And you just sort of knew it was just sort of a part of you already, and people responded well. So, but thank you so much for sharing that. That's really amazing. It's such an amazing journey. And I'm excited to hear more about it. I wanted to ask, since it seems like it has been very influential in your life, but sort of a direct question, that have yoga and Reiki been instrumental in your own healing, journey, and also just health wise as well, speaking materially, like body, mind, that type of thing?
Yes. So first, I just want to circle back to when you were talking about how yoga is such a great, tool for people to dive into the Bhakti yoga path and other healing modalities. And the way I see it is like, for example, we know that Mahadev Shiva, he is the Mahayogi, the greatest yogi. And we also know that he's the gateway to Vrindavan. And so in the same way, yoga, I feel like, is the gateway to Bhakti, because we're doing these asanas and these practices, and then naturally we become attracted to kirtan and Bhakti and, a sattvic lifestyle and, ahimsa lifestyle. And so definitely yoga is a great tool and gateway for all of that. So for sure. And and yoga for me definitely changed my life 360. I feel like I lived a completely different life before. I think when I reflect back on my past, I'm like, did I die and get rebirth? Like, did I like two different people?
Wow.
Yeah, I feel like I lived many lives. When I do share with people my past, they're like, what? Like, like it's just two different worlds. So I definitely feel that yoga, what it did for me before I even became a devotee, like I said, it helped me change my diet. It really cleansed me and my mind to feel differently and know that things were not serving me anymore, just intuitively, just not because somebody told me to, but because I could just feel it. When you feel that natural yoga high, you don't want to ruin it with something that's going to lower that vibration. So you want to keep that vibration. So you start eating more clean and, juicing and just being around healthier energies. So naturally it just opened up that path for me. And I had to change my relationship at the time, although I had a very great partner. He was a very good person. Just the lifestyle was different. It was more materialistic. It was more, he wasn't vegetarian and things like that. And so I had to make a shift. And And that shift also allowed me to open up and meet other people that helped me along my path. And so yoga definitely transformed me, mind, body, spirit, always feeling more present, and definitely reconnecting with my breath more often. You know, we naturally breathe, so we're not necessarily conscious or thinking about it, but having conscious breath awareness is so transformational for a person's life, because it really helps anxiety, it really helps anger, depression, and just gives you those endorphins to just feel better every day. So yoga itself, the asana practice, definitely and still does help me along my journey. And then, like I said, it also opened up to other healing modalities that called to me. When I was younger, actually, I was fortunate enough to be around these type of modalities. My father is an acupuncturist, and he's also a Tai Chi master, sensei, Qigong. And so I definitely had that type of energy around me from a very young age. I was more attracted to dance when I was younger, but I was always, you know, living that lifestyle was always around me. And also my great grandmother. So she was like 90 something. She was still alive when I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And she was a yoga teacher all the way up into her late 90s. She's been
amazing. Oh my gosh. Wow.
She's
It's
been
incredible.
on Yoga Journal and everything like that, the cover of Yoga Journal and everything back in the days.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's
she
amazing.
was kind of a little popular one in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, and I knew that at the time, but now that I'm a yoga teacher, I'm like, wow, my great grandmother, like she had a book and everything. So that really helped me feel connected. So there's definitely, thankfully, some karma that I have in my family that is also given me this gift to be in this path. But yeah, I think I answered the question, correct?
Yeah. So would you say that, I mean, if you feel comfortable to maybe share about a particular struggle that you had to endure in order to, where, you know, this practice of being a healer, or even just the healing process, that your background has helped you with that?
Yes. Yeah, I would say it all kind of crashed down on me and pushed me to use these tools I know around 2017. I experienced so many shifts all at once happening, from a toxic relationship to also just making so many different changes in my life, losing a lot of material things, material attachments, and a lot of suffering at the time, emotional suffering. And it really was the time for me to use all the tools. It was kind of a surrender moment. It was kind of a desperation of like, this is all I have. I'm losing everything else, but I still have my yoga practice. I still have my japa. I still have my Reiki. And I just kind of had to really heal myself, because I was at the time, at least that's how I felt in my mind, very alone. And so these tools is what made me feel safe. It is what made me feel that I was okay, got me out of depression. And it was something that I needed to also be consistent with. And I think when you lose everything, it's a little easier to become consistent in the things that you do have when you know they're helping you. So it was something that I really had to, in other words, stop for a while teaching it to others and really giving it to myself. And I kind of had to give myself that nurturing energy for about a year straight of just me and self-discovery, and using these tools every day to help me come out of where I was. And the yoga practice, the japa meditation, and my own energy healing practices really lifted me up at that time.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting that you that you talk about sort of stopping teaching others and in order to focus on yourself. I think, as is already written in Srimad Bhagavatam and other places as well, is that, when Krishna really starts to bless you, then he takes away all those material obstacles and attachments and things like that. So, and around that time, I believe, is when you met your spiritual master, Srila BV Vana Maharaj. So,
that's when I met Didi. That's when I met Didi. I met my Guru Dev in 2016, but Didi was really the one at that time that was my rock. And she would always remind me, when Krishna likes you, he'll give you everything. But when Krishna really loves you, take it away.
Oh, wow.
I'm trying to understand this, Didi. Try to get it.
Yeah. I mean, to have that as kind of a constant reminder, because sometimes I think everyone obviously goes through some level of suffering, but I think just devotees understand it differently. We understand it from not just the karmic perspective, but then we also understand it as being mercy. So it's really interesting how you were able to have all of that go on, and then also be, like you said, you were anchored. You had such a nice foundation in the association of both, Srimati Shamrani Didi, and who is just, I mean, we have no words, just there's no words to really properly glorify and describe her. But then also to have your own Gurudev, who you met just a year prior, to be able to, sort of usher you through that process. So you basically had two hands that you were holding, and along with your japa, along with this yoga practice, along with the Reiki. And it is beautiful. You just sort of taking time for yourself. I think devotees, and I would say, yes, even the outside world also, but everyone needs kind of a self-care package. Shamrani Didi also describes in her book about how, Srila Prabhupada gave her the instruction to focus on her health first, because she was doing so much seva. Yes. And just sort of tirelessly doing seva and not really caring for herself, really. So it does bring you back to a point where, yes, it's not like Krishna says to just like go on just doing something and being in a toxic relationship or being with things that don't serve you and serve the path, that even on Ekadashi, for example, like if you're going to spend the day sleeping because you're totally fasting from, say, doing Nirjal or something like that, then how is it serving you? How are you actually honoring it? So better take something, water or some type of fruits or milk or something, in order so that you can do your seva and really get closely and linked up with the holy name. But someone told me, a very amazing and also wise devotee, that in order for us to be able to channel that healing for others, we have to sort of go through a healing process ourselves. We have to kind of go through the suffering, so to speak, in order to be able to give something and to really empathize and to really channel that for other people, because you've walked in their shoes, or to some degree you walked in their shoes. So I think that that's really special that you've been able to do that for yourself. Is there a specific type of yoga that you practice, or is it just, okay, would you mind describing about that?
Sure. I practice Ashtanga Yoga.
Okay.
That is actually how I met the devotees. So there is a yoga instructor in Miami. His name is Jayadev. Well, actually, initiating name is Madan Mohan, but we all know him as Jaya. And he he still is a very amazing Ashtanga Yoga teacher. And so as I became a yoga teacher myself, I learned more Vinyasa Yoga and Hatha Yoga. But when I learned about Ashtanga Yoga, I was very attracted to it because it had a lot of discipline. It was very much sadhana to me. The Ashtangis would wake up for, Brahma Muhurta time as well, right before the sunrise. and do their practice. And the practice is the same sequence every time. So it's also consistent. And what you're doing is you're developing strength and alignment, and you grow in that same sequence. You are constantly growing and elevating and being able to add different like variations. And so like if you're jumping forward, you might jump forward into a handstand, coming slowly down, but it's still the same practice. You're just getting stronger and stronger to be able to add some little extra things to it as you advance. And basically that really taught me discipline, which is something I needed because I'm very Vata, and that's very hard for me sometimes to just stay focused on one thing. So Ashtanga Yoga for me was very attractive. And so when I learned about Jaya offering these sadhana practices, and at the time he had like a little ashram, and we could just go there and show up, and he would basically start off with japa, and then you would do your practice. And so it was a little best of both worlds, and the deities were there, and the vibe of the ghee lamp and the incense, and then afterwards you could give like a little prasad. So the whole experience is just so like, wow, this is so beautiful. And so that's kind of how I got into the Ashtanga Yoga practice. And that is something that I personally do myself, and I really love and encourage people to learn. But I do teach all kinds of modalities. I also teach Hatha Yoga, Vinyasa Yoga, and things like that.
Can you talk about the other, you mentioned Vinyasa and Hatha Yoga, because I'll be honest,
What's the difference?
Yeah, what is the difference? Because, you know, you'll see it in different yoga studios. People are like, you know, Vinyasa flow and yoga nidra this and things of that nature. And honestly, I have no idea. I should probably preface this by saying that that in terms of like the healing arts and in terms of yoga and stuff like that, and this will also kind of lead into the next question, but I do want you to answer this one first, that, you know, I think for the sort of Bhakti yoga purists, and I think I was one of them, perhaps, that, you know, all of these other modalities, they're not necessary. You know, you don't do them. You don't need to practice them because, you know, there's no point. There's no use for them really in comparison to actually Bhakti yoga. But more recently, I would say probably in the last like year to year and a half is when I started to explore these more. And for my own self, for my own journey, and for my own sanity, really. I think for devotees, sometimes it is hard to be able to speak about these things. And it is hard for devotees to be able to speak about their emotions, because we're often told to suppress a lot of these things and to focus on being humble and tolerant, respectful, you know, and we don't want to fake the process. And the key really is to be, you know, totally sharnagat, you know, to fully surrender, first at the lotus feet of Gurudev, who will then transfer us sort of up the line. But it's easier said than done, right? You know, I mean, if you're having one foot in this world and attempting to have one foot in that world, you know, you can't really do both. So I think there's a lot of guck that we carry on from our previous, since time immemorial, lives. And we have to, especially when you're coming to the process of bhakti, it sort of rises up to the surface in order to be cleansed. And so when you go through that, it is kind of daunting, it is scary, and it almost is just like, what is going on? What am I going through? And so in that instance, it's like, no, like, hold onto your japa bag, hold on to this process, you know, this is your saving grace. And it is so true. But I think for someone, say like me, sometimes even the process, even getting to the process of really consistently practicing the limbs of bhakti can be hard. And we sort of, you go through your trials and tribulations with that, and, you know, you're trying to really hold on and say, what my Gurudev would say, don't be hopeless, don't be weak. But sometimes it's really difficult. So that's sort of that's sort of a preface to the next question. But yeah, I wasn't really so much a believer in any of these types of modalities. I didn't see the use for them. I didn't care about them. I didn't want to go to a yoga studio to practice. There was nothing that could offer me. But since then, my mood and my mind has changed. So yeah, if you could please kind of talk about what the difference is between Ashtanga, Hatha, Vinyas, and whatever other types is out there, I would appreciate that.
Sure. And then I will also like to reflect a little bit about what you said about the devotees and the perception on asana yoga. So basically, I explained a little bit about Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga is the 8 limbs of yoga. It has it starts off with primary series. So that's the sequence I was telling you about, and you really just advance in that for years. So it's a sadhana. It's a sadhana. And for me, out of all the practices, I felt like Ashtanga was the one that really complemented Bhakti yoga practice, really complemented japa meditation, because it's something that, the Ashtangis are very, very like a little heavy. They're a little serious. The practitioners, they wake up, they practice. They're not like some flowy, and they're very in their drishti. They're very into their sadhana. And usually, if you're also a devotee that practices that, then that opens the space to also do your japa, whether it's before or after your practice, because you're already up early, you're already in that sadhana vibration. So for me, it really helped me also do my japa, because at the time, I didn't have the inspiration to wake up just for japa because I was so tired physically. So the asana practice that early really gave me energy. And then I'm like, yes, I have all this energy. So for me, it really helped me with that, and sometimes I would practice on the beach in the sunrise and, do a japa walk around the beach. And it was really perfect combination. So that's Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga then has a secondary series that is a little more advanced. And that usually takes years for people. Some people don't even dive into that and will just do primary their whole life. So that's what I really loved about Ashtanga Yoga. But Vinyasa Yoga is also, let's go to Hatha Yoga, because Hatha Yoga is actually the traditional form of yoga. It's one of the first yoga asana practices. Actually, Ashtanga Yoga uses a lot of poses, a lot of asanas from Hatha Yoga. So it was derived from Hatha. And Hatha is really about connecting with your breath. It's a little bit of a slower practice. You slow you're slowing it down so you can really tune in with your breath, and then feel that mind-body connection with the poses as well. And so that is when that's how sun salutations were introduced and so on. And so Hatha Yoga, I would say, is the original form of yoga. It's the root of yoga. And Vinyasa Yoga was something that kind of derived from both Ashtanga and Hatha. And what Vinyasa means is linking the breath with the movements. So basically, it's a little bit of a faster paced yoga. It is constantly moving. So you are constantly moving your breath in and out. So whatever you're doing, inhale, exhale. So throughout the whole practice, you are linking the breath with every single movement. And that is what vinyasa is. Vinyasa also means that it's free flowing. So there isn't a set sequence, and it can be created. Basically, you can just kind of compile your own sequence together. It doesn't really have a traditional form, and it is most common in yoga studios. So it's the most common yoga practice. And some vinyasas can be a little slower. Some vinyasas can be much faster, even more of a power vinyasa style. But basically the whole time you're moving in and out with your breath. Whereas hatha, you do pause a lot more. You're more in the experience for a little bit longer. And Ashtanga Yoga as well. It's more of Ashtanga Yoga, I would say, is probably the most strengthening, intense physical practice. But it's also very, it's very elegant. As you see Ashtangis practice, you can see when they jump forward, it's like they're floating in the air. very
Mm.
elegantly landing. It's like this very elegant practice. So I would say that's kind of my description of the three that I've learned over time. And then there's all these other kinds of yogas that have been created, like yin yoga. Yin yoga is like deep stretching, holding poses for really long time. And it's mostly floor based. So it's made to really like open up the hips and it's more hip opener based. And yeah, those are basically the most common yoga practices that I would say. And then there's like the hot yoga and the Bikram yoga and all these other things. But I would say the more traditional styles of yoga would be Ashtanga, Hatha, and Vinyasa.
Nice.
Yes, you're welcome. And kind of coming back to what you were saying about devotees and their perception of asana yoga, and I totally understand, you know, especially if you were born in the movement, how much you learned from such a young age. You know, you have so much knowledge in Bhakti that you know that ultimately Bhakti is the goal. And so it's kind of like we can skip ahead all these other practices and just do Bhakti to go where we want to go, because ultimately yoga, asana, meditation, all of these things take us up that, you know, that route, that tree to Bhakti. So it's all taking us there. But when you have Bhakti already, you can kind of just go right there. So I get it. But at the same time, I've, in my experiences, observing lots of devotees and aspiring devotees and people transitioning and even born devotees, you know, the way I see it without judgment, without criticism, is more like, I feel like unless we're like fully surrendered in the sense that we're really taking shelter under, you know, a Vaishnav, that we're around their association physically a lot, or we are just immersed in service and we're not really have other responsibilities in the material world, or we're living in the temple, or, you know, we're living in India and Vrindavan, or we're constantly immersed with that association, then I think it's a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, because it's definitely challenging to be in that lifestyle, but for just being one pointed to Bhakti, I think that we have a lot more tools if we're in those settings. But when we are balancing our life, we live at home, we're grihasta, we are trying to balance work life and also spiritual life and these types of things. And, or we don't have a consistent japa practice, or we do, but we would like to do more, or, you know, or our minds are still disturbed no matter how much japa we do and things like that, that I feel like having something that centers you physically in your body supports your japa, supports your meditation. As long as we know that, you know, ultimately japa and ultimately Bhakti is the highest goal, and we're not replacing asana for japa. Like, oh, I'm doing asana, so I don't need to do my japa anymore. Okay, that's a little different. But if we're continuing our Bhakti sadhana and we can add to it, you know, just like we can add Krishna into our life, well, we can add asana, we can add breath work, we can add Reiki, you know, these things that help us feel better, because we are still in this physical realm, we are still in this body, and our minds, I can only speak for myself, still get very disturbed. And this really helps me, and I also see how it can help others just center themselves and ground. And sometimes I experience devotees that are very ambitious in pursuing it, and that used to maybe do yoga and things, and they just kind of drop everything to pursue Bhakti, which is great. But then I see them constantly in distress, constantly, I would say, an emotional mess, constantly here and there, and imbalance, and kind of going through their anartha-vritti process.
Right.
And all this stuff is coming up, and, you know, these type of modalities will help them kind of center themselves back, you know. And I don't think, this is my only opinion, it's not, I wouldn't say bona fide, but I don't think that we need to drop everything that serves us in an emotional, physical health just because we are pursuing Bhakti, unless, like I said, we really are just surrendered, you know, and that's a completely different mood. But if we are in a balance of life, then I do think these modalities are, they're servitude, they help. And I do think that's why a lot of temples and centers, preaching centers, invite people to do a yoga asana practice so that they can also be interested in bhakti, because it does, I do think they do have a relationship where they can help. And then eventually there might be a time where a person feels like it doesn't serve them anymore, and they just want to be in their bhajan, and and then that's the goal. That's great. But I think if we are struggling, these practices, I don't find them to be completely distracting, as long as you're still keeping up with your own bhakti sadhana. There are other yoga practices I would probably recommend staying away from if you're in bhakti yoga, is like kundalini yoga and things like that. Those are more like playing with energy, and I don't feel like they're supporting bhakti. It's a little bit more impersonal. It has a little bit more of a Mayavad energy. But the yogas that I've mentioned, Hatha Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Vinyasa Yoga, and even Reiki, these practices, I definitely think could be a support system along the journey.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for such a thorough answer. I think it's an important conversation. And I think this sort of opens up the door to be able to have more practical conversations like this, because oftentimes we, maybe in our own personal circles, but just not in a public forum, are we actually discussing about the role that maybe some of these additives could play in a devotee's life in terms of grounding them, disciplining them, centering them, like you said. So I do think that it is basically your entire answer was excellent. I do feel like the whole idea of these modalities being a substitution, not at all. And I think definitely what you said to sort of only practice one thing and to not see it as an addition to say, like, I'm not going to do my japa now because I've done my discipline practice, I've done my asanas, I'm not going to pursue sadhana bhakti at all, or any other process within the bhakti realm. I think it's really important to just say that. It's really important to, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to not only have you on, but to be able to do this Vedic Health Collective, because I think that for some people, devotees or not, I think that oftentimes there is sort of it's misconstrued. It's why people maybe have a practice. I know there's plenty of devotees who go to the gym. There's some devotees who are in martial arts. That's what grounds them. It's what keeps their physical strength. It's perhaps even endorphins are released, through the exercise process, martial arts process, Tai Chi, Qigong, all of these different things. So everyone sort of does do something. It's just that we don't necessarily talk about it all that much, and you sort of make bhakti the foundation, and that's the center point. And then, you don't talk about like your fitness life. You don't talk about the other things. And what I find that you've done, which is really beautiful, is that you've sort of integrated the two together, that you've sort of married these two. Your bhakti life is your central life. That is what you do. It is who you are. You are an aspiring bhakta or a bhakti yogini. But at the same time, you also have incorporated these other things that have been able to service you. And what you said was beautiful, that when you do reach that level, fully surrendered, and these things no longer serve you, do away with them. And obviously fully immerse yourself in bhakti. So I really appreciate your answer. I think it was top notch, gold standard, golden arts, golden healing arts, perfect. And I think I I think I touched on those things in terms of the next questions. So you have, and you're in the process also of doing and holding many trainings and healing sessions and things like that. So what do you hope that your trainees, or anybody who's taking a class from you, what do you hope that they come away with after taking a course or a class with you?
So I have been starting to offer these Reiki Attunement trainings so that people who would like to dive deeper into the Reiki healing path can become practitioners and offer it to others properly. And I do like to educate them in the trainings as well. I do make some Bhakti comparisons, like explaining to them, for example, when a Reiki Master is giving you the attunement, there is a potency behind that direct transmission versus, like, for example, a lot of these people can find these symbols that we give, which are supposed to also be very sacred and private, kind of like when we get our Gayatris. They're given by the Reiki Master and they're supposed to be only for you, but they are available on Google. You can find them, they're there. You can technically teach yourself, but there's a potency that happens with the Reiki Master attunement initiation, just like, well, I wouldn't say just like, it's not the same as, but similarly to like when a guru is giving you the mantras, you could find these mantras online, but there's a potency that happens. And not only so you get the potency from the guru that's giving it to you, but you're also getting the potency of their guru and their guru and their guru in the direct lineage that goes on for, over thousands of years. And so not that I consider a Reiki Master on the same platform as a guru, but just similarly kind of giving that comparison of like the importance of receiving it from a Reiki Master, because then they're also getting it from my Reiki Master and their Reiki Master and their Reiki Master, going down a lineage, because the Reiki practice does have a lineage as well. And so I kind of make these little comparisons in my training. I do also educate them. One of the principles of Reiki is be kind to all living things. And so that's also something that I talk about, where I introduce ahimsa lifestyle and what ahimsa is, and a plant-based diet, and why I go vegetarian. And so I try to also open up the door for conversations about vegetarian diet or vegan diet for people who are not there yet. And sometimes that actually gives them the strength to want to embark that journey after their Reiki training, because similarly to like a yoga practice, they feel different, they feel cleaner, they feel lighter and, brighter. And so then, to keep that energy going, they know now that if they can have a plant-based diet, that will definitely support them. And, so what I want them to take away from my trainings is a transformational lifestyle. It's not just a service that they can offer somebody, but it's actually, they come in to learn a service so they can offer to others. But really what I'm doing is transforming or trying to transform them as a person. And, so they might have come in there with an idea of like, oh, I want Reiki to be a new profession of mine, so I need the certification. But then when they're in the training, it's like, yeah, but you can also be vegetarian, and you can also like japa meditation, and you can also do these other practices that will support your Reiki practice. And I kind of give them a little bit of all these other tools so it's a Bhakti infused Reiki training. It's just like dovetailed. And for those that are curious, I do sometimes even provide books or invite them to the center if they're in Miami and stuff like that, to meet Didi and things like that. So I use it as a gateway platform as well for people to hear about Bhakti or to learn what it is. Because like I said, I do feel like all these tools ultimately are leading them back home, back to Godhead. And that's the goal, is eventually to get to Bhakti. So yeah, I guess that would be their takeaway that I hope that they have, is a transformation in their mind, body, and spirit when they come out of the training to go towards a more one-pointed lifestyle.
That's great. Bhakti infused. I like that. I think what you guys have done, honestly, in Miami is amazing. It's beyond amazing. the fact that Srimati Shamrani Didi has made that her hub now, and her home essentially. But what you guys have done down there is just, you guys have just, I mean, I don't know all the intricacies, but I can say that you guys have worked together. There's a level of cooperation, there's a level of respect amongst all of you, in which you are able to share and spread Krishna consciousness, and give what you know, share what you know. And whether you're doing it through Reiki, or whether you're doing it through book distribution, or through Kirtan, or whatever type of thing that you were personally helping to facilitate, or you're helping others to also draw in and facilitate, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I commend all of you for doing what you guys have done and continue to do. So
yeah, there's definitely a movement happening there in Miami.
Very, very strong. Yeah. I mean, obviously with Didi, you know,
of course,
I mean,
all by her.
Yeah, it's going to be a very powerful thing. But yeah, I think just what you guys have started. And I think that is also probably what prompted Didi to want to, because she could see the potential, and she could see just how sincere all of you are, and just how much, you know, you need her. And I think in the times that I've been with Didi, you know, you think that you're going to go there and, you know, you're going to help Didi and, you know, cook for her, or get her water, or do this, do that. And meanwhile, she's just kind of working on you. Right. You know, she's just sort of channeling whatever she has received from her Gurujan, from, you know, Srila Prabhupada, from Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayani Maharaj, from Srila Bhaktivedanta Bharti Goswami Maharaj. And she's just sort of just helping to act like a salve for all of us, you know, and just helps with that heart surgery, you know, helps with that, you know, clearing our eyes, you know, from the cataracts and being able to actually see. So you all are so fortunate that you guys get to, I know you're in Mexico right now, but when you were
back eventually.
yeah. You know, when you are in Miami, then, you know, you guys are so fortunate to have our association. So I mentioned before how you're the founder of Golden Healing Arts, and I just, if you could just touch on what prompted the name, like what inspired the name, and also what you hope to see Golden Healing Arts become, or what it is becoming, like what the purpose is behind it.
Thank you. So Golden Healing Arts. Okay, so normally in the alternative healing modalities, you will hear a lot about, especially when you receive, you know, guided meditations or Reiki attunement, you will hear people talk a lot about this light, this white light, or this golden light energy. And so it's a very common term to use, this golden light that represents universal life force energy. And my last name is Golden. I also feel that Golden represents Gauranga and also represents Srimati Radharani. And so just all of it together is a beautiful name to that means a lot to me. And so I thought, well, why not use Golden? And then Golden Healing is already kind of a term used, Golden Healing. And then arts is just all the different modalities that are combined together that are alternative healing. So then all together, Golden Healing Arts. So that's how the name came about. And what was the second question? Sorry.
Just if you could tell us like a little bit more about the purpose and the vision. Yeah.
So originally it started off something that I was doing around 2020 to have more virtual connections with people for healing, because at the time the pandemic was happening and everybody was a little bit more online and not so much in person. Prior to that, I was doing a lot of in-person healings, different types of clients, group sessions, and so on. I wasn't really doing the trainings back then, but more just sessions. And So 2020 was when I decided, okay, I want to really start to pursue golden healing arts. And that is when I started giving distant healing, because with Reiki, it is very powerful to also do distant. You don't only have to be in person, because we learned that we are actually tapping into this universal life force energy versus using our own supply of energy versus taking someone's energy. So even though it might feel better in the thinking mind to be in person, for our egos to feel like something's happening, actually, you know, if the power of Reiki is all around us, it's universal. It's like tuning into a radio station. If you're tuned into that station, somebody else could be completely far away on the same station, and you both can hear the same song, but you don't have to be in the same room for that. So it's similarly the same with Reiki. You're attuning, that's what the word attunement is, into the Reiki universal life force energy. So it really pushed me as well as a practitioner to have more faith in distant healings, because it wasn't something I was doing prior. And when I saw the result, when I saw how much people were in need of the healing at the time, you know, the pandemic was very traumatic for a lot of people, and a lot of, you know, shifts happening. So that connection, because people were, you know, just desiring connection, because a lot of people really quarantined and took the quarantine very serious, and we're not seeing anybody. And so I really saw how much need was for distant healing, and it really pushed me as a practitioner to start opening myself up in that way. Excuse me. And from there, I kind of started realizing, like, wow, this is something that I could do. And me being also a person that moves on the go very often, it also supports my lifestyle to be remote. And so I was just doing the process of doing distant yoga classes, distant healings. And from there is where a kind of golden healing art started. And then I paused for a bit, but recently I've been pursuing the trainings. I did my Reiki Master as well in 2020 with my teacher. And when you become a Reiki Master, that is really like when you decide to become a teacher, so that you can attune other students to become Reiki practitioners. So it's basically the Reiki training part, so that you can offer these trainings. So I became the Reiki Master in 2020, but I didn't really like pursue trainings or anything yet. It wasn't actually until last year that a couple asked me if I could attune them, if I could, you know, be their Reiki Master. And I was like, well, I technically can. So I put together a package. I made manuals, and I kind of put like a whole module together, and I did my first Reiki training, and it was so amazing for them and transformational for them as well as for me. I just felt so like I was in my element. I felt like, wow, this is something I really love to do. And the universe responded, Krishna responded, because afterwards I was just getting contacted left and right for trainings and trainings and trainings. And at that time it was in person. But then I thought, well, you know, why not open this up for more people? It doesn't have to be just the community I know in Miami. I want to be able to offer this service to others. And so I started promoting that I offer virtual trainings, and basically it was a success. I'm getting lots of people interested, and I see the transformation that it happens in people's lives afterwards. And so the goal for Golden Healing Arts is to be more of a virtual based healing modality platform. There's still opportunities for in-person if the person wanting to receive and the trainee, the teacher or the yoga teacher or the master, so on, is in the same place, then it's open as well for in-person. But the goal is really to be virtual. And right now I am the person that's mainly giving any of the sessions or the trainings in Golden Healing Arts. I also offer shadow work integration, guided meditations. I also studied and did my certification in hypnosis. So I have other modalities that I can offer. So I'm working on my website, which will be live soon, so that it can be accessible to everyone virtually. And then my goal is to have more practitioners and more teachers and more healers or conduits that are part of the team that have different modalities that I don't offer, or the same modalities, but just having more options. so that it can grow into a really big platform and be worldwide and help more people.
Great. Yeah, that's a pretty ambitious endeavor, but at the same time, I know that you have the backing of so many supporters, plus also, your Gurudev and Srimati Narayani Dasi. So I have no doubt that you'll be successful in that. I definitely wish you all the best. It's amazing that you're pursuing this. And I think that it's nice to hear that it's devotee led. Because I feel that sometimes when you go to various other teachers who may not be connected to Bhakti, then oftentimes you'll see that when they may describe Bhakti, then it's very watered down. It's not very connected, especially you're initiated as well. So that even provides more like credibility, if you will, to be able to speak about that aspect, and then to be able to infuse it, as you said, and then to be able to offer these other modalities as well. I think just coming from the Bhakti perspective, and this is not to shoot down anyone else or not to criticize or judge anyone else who may not be a devotee, but I think there's a certain level of Shakti that comes from when you're connected to disciplic succession, and then you're offering these other modalities as opposed to the other way around. So I think it's nice that you're doing this, and I wish you all the best. I think it's going to be a great thing. I'm going to skip the question on motherhood.
Okay.
Do you want? I can ask it.
Oh, sure. I mean, either way.
Okay. So I think it's not so much a secret now, in terms of the fact that you're on your way to motherhood. You're going through that journey right now. I'm sure, like many mothers, it's not an easy road. I don't have any personal experience with it, but I can say from the people that I've helped or I've treated along the way, the morning sickness and sort of the hormonal changes, everything that goes along with it. It's not easy. So, have these healing arts, has your background helped you in your journey thus far?
Yes. My first trimester was very difficult, very nauseous, a lot of morning sickness, evening sickness, midday sickness.
Just 24 hours.
Yeah, I don't know why they call it morning sickness. It happens at any place. But I think at that time I couldn't really do my yoga practice physically. I had to take a pause. But I definitely was just using Reiki all day long. I'm using hands on the belly, lots of energy, sending lots of love there, and different parts of my body, my head. I would get headaches. And so I definitely used Reiki a lot. I also used sound healing. I wasn't doing it on myself, but like listening to different frequencies and sound healing to really relax, as well as guided meditations, as well as Harikatha and, Kirtan and everything like that, just kind of being more immersed into receiving, allowing myself to really receive. I'm used to really being a giver, and that was my time to receive. And so I would use these tools to really help me. And I'm still using it now. I am in a place where I can start being physical. Thankfully, I'm not really nauseous anymore. And I have to shift into a more of a prenatal yoga style, which is, there are some differences into what I can or can't do compared to a normal practice. Not really, shouldn't really be twisting in certain ways, and I shouldn't really be doing too much things on my back or belly. So there are some limitations, but it does help me keep the blood flow, help my mind and body just feel connected with the baby, and and also avoid taking on extra weight in the process as well. And also helping me not just be in my mind, because this journey to motherhood is something I didn't think would happen to me in this lifetime. I was actually not sure I would be a mother in this lifetime. And then I was blessed. And so now I definitely feel like my mind is all over the place and figuring out how to prepare for this, because it wasn't something that some people, you know, they prepare their whole lives, or at least they try in their mind to prepare. And then when it happens, they like know what to do, and they got everything organized, and, you know, they have their sisters and their girlfriends and their mothers like all ready to go. And I was a little bit of a more renounced in that aspect of, like, you know, not so much of a renunciate, but just like, I didn't think was my style. But I am opening up to it. I am embracing it more. And I definitely think these practices help me kind of center myself.
Yeah, that's special. It's, like I said, not easy. And that's great that you're not experiencing that morning or 24-hour sickness or whatever you want to call it. But it is, to now go from 2 to now 3. And, you know, you're feeding yourself, but you're also feeding this baby. That's essentially, you become the baby's first guru. So, you know, it's such a heavy responsibility. I think you're going to do well, you know, even though you weren't necessarily preparing for this and you were blessed with it, you know, I think you'll be a great mom. It's going to be a beautiful thing. This baby is going to be so well nourished, spiritually, mentally, physically, and obviously Bhakti wise, because of your connections with your spiritual master, with Srimati Narayani Dasi. So, you know, I think kind of can't wait for you. It's such an exciting thing. So, you know, congratulations on that. So what do you love most, would you say, about these healing arts? What's, I guess, we've talked about what has helped you to gravitate towards them, but what really do you love the most about what you do, or about even just the healing process or helping others to heal? What do you love most?
I think what I love most is seeing the transformation in myself and in people's lives. It really brings me satisfaction. In the same way, you know, when we preach to somebody and they're taking on to the Bhakti path, there's just like this, yes, like, we love it. And you just feel like this euphoria for that person. That somehow or another, your connection, you know, obviously through the guru, you know, our guru's mercy and stuff connected us, but somehow through that connection, you were able to help that person, or, you know, help them realize something that, you know, they can help themselves. So I think that's what brings me the most joy, is really seeing the transformation. And also these practices, they help me kind of stay in the heart space. I'm not saying I don't get in my mind or my ego or those things, but they really help me connect back with the heart space, which sometimes I feel that can be missing. Like, I can feel, if we're talking just about Bhakti Yoga practices in general, where Bhakti Yoga in general is a very heart-based practice, but sometimes in the community, I feel like it can be a very serious, heavy, and we kind of close ourselves off. I think you had mentioned that earlier, a little bit, you know, so that we're in our sadhana and our bhajan, and we don't want to hear about this and we don't want to hear about that, and don't tell me, you know. And that's good. Like I said, in the same way that I was saying about the asana stuff, is like, that's good if you are surrendered, if you're in shelter, if you are fully immersed, you know, then that's your drishti, that's your focus. But when we're a little bit in the mix, you know, I definitely feel like we have emotions, we have traumas, we have other things that are going on. And if we just suppress, then I don't see how that can fully support our bhakti path. I don't see how that can help. If anything, I can see how it can hinder, because then we're making offenses onto others, and, you know, we're disrespecting ourselves or others. And we might be doing our japa, and we might be doing our services, but then, you know, how are we actually treating people, and how are we actually receiving each other? Which I also learned that bhakti is all about relationship, you know, obviously relationship with Guru and Krishna, but also relationship with Vaishnavas and other aspiring devotees around us. And sometimes I can see that is missing that heart connection, that empathy. And I feel like this really kind of helps me stay empathic, compassionate, and be in that heart space to be able to practice this to be able to practice the things that we learn, and forgiveness and humble humility and all these things. I think when we are more grounded and more centered in our mind and our hearts are more open, then it's just more natural for us to understand these other things we learned in Bhakti.
Yeah, it's kind of like that relinquishing of like Purush Bhav, that allows you to be able to connect on a deeper level with these very intricate qualities, humility, tolerance, empathy. I mean, of course, compassion, all of those things. When you finally sort of rid yourself of that false identification, and then it allows you to open up even more and more and more. So I definitely agree. I think it is seemingly missing in some communities within our Gaudiya Vaishnava Mandal, within our circle of Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that sometimes you see that there's a stress on certain things, but it's maybe taken out of context. Right. And so you don't see the overlay of bhakti, and perhaps it's due to what that person has received, or what that aspiring devotee has received, and maybe they didn't receive it, maybe not necessarily from a bona fide spiritual master, who's to say. But at the same time, I think sometimes there is a strong disconnect with the practice and then the person doing the practice. Yeah. And so we do really have to work on that, as a community. So yeah, final question. I just kind of wanted to end off on something, sweet, that how do you practice being the best person that you can be, like, every day? Like, what drives you, what inspires you to be that best person?
I would say I am consistently thinking of my spiritual masters and how I can make them proud. And that gives me motivation every day to stay in a type of framework of empathy, as well as sadhana, as well as doing my practices, because I know that doing these practices are just going to shape me into a better version of myself. But I think what I really try to do in general is kind of be a person of integrity and be very authentic. I try not, especially with Bhakti, and it's something that I talked a lot about with Didi, that I think she really appreciates about me, is that I don't, I'm very real in the sense that I know my level, or I think I know my level, and I know still have a lot to go, and I'm not trying to run before I can walk. And even though I have an ultimate goal, that I know that it's still a process to get there, and I really try my best to be a voice of reason. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, but I try to also help others in that aspect who want to and feel like they want to say this or do this, but they're afraid of judgment or disappointment or so on. And I really try to stay authentic, and knowing that, I am an aspiring devotee, but I know that I have many faults, and I know that I'm not exactly doing everything perfectly. And so I just try to keep myself in that humility of knowing that I'm not actually, like the doer in a lot of things. And I just kind of, like I was saying with the Reiki practice, I see myself more as a medium than like I'm his healer and I'm the one helping others. Like, no, I actually know my place And I try to do that with a lot of other things. And, you know, I'm very driven, like I said, about helping, especially devotees to let go, aspiring devotees, to let go of that fear of like, if you want to do a yoga asana practice and you want to do these things and you're like kind of suffering because you're not, because you want to externally appear to be a certain way, you know, that I'd rather the person be more authentic of where they're at and like get to where they want to be, rather than trying to externally put on this image so that they can be viewed as a certain way, or, you know, their guru can accept them or something like that. I've never really been the type to do that. I kind of stay in my pace, and I definitely make changes and shifts as I'm ready for them in my personal path, but I don't force myself to do things that I'm not ready for. You know, and I will have conversations, like honest conversations with Dee to let her know, for example, I'm not ready for that. You know, she gives me an instruction. It's not that I'm not listening, but I will honestly let her know I'm not ready for it, but I'm receiving it. And maybe there'll be a time where I make that shift, but I'm not going to just say yes and then go out and then just do the opposite, because I just feel like that creates a different type of relationship. So I think by trying to stay authentic of where I'm at helps me, it makes me feel at least that it helps me advance versus trying to push myself somewhere and feeling like I'm not actually being authentic on the external. And I do think that it's a little hard for us, even though we know not to judge, not to criticize, but our eyes are always looking at things and are always, you know, telling our minds information. And I know that many people, you know, will say things about other people that, you know, that, oh, they're just like externally, but I actually know what they do. And I actually know they do this and they do that. And so I just don't want to be that kind of person that someone can say that about me. I'd rather them be like, yeah, Narayani does that, but she's honest about it.
Right.
You know, she's honest about where she's at. So I guess trying to stay honest, trying to stay authentic and in integrity, as well as, you know, moving forward and knowing the things that do make my gurus proud, and to just be in a good example for others as they see me the best way that I can, is what inspires me.
Would you say that the authenticity and the integrity is like advice that you would give to other people, is to like be also like that as well, as much as they can?
Depending where they're at in their position, especially if they're, you know, like if someone is really serving a pure Vaishnav so closely, and, you know, then they might have to let go of certain things so that they could be in that space. You know, it depends where they're at. But if they're grihasta, where they're, you know, single and living their life and working, and, you know, and they want to do things, or they do it anyways, but kind of keep it under the rocks or whatever, I am an encourager of being more authentic, especially having more open and authentic conversations with our spiritual masters or our shiksha gurus, or, you know, or senior devotees that we feel comfortable with about where we're at, so that we can grow. Like, for example, I'm not in that space anymore, but I was at a time where I smoked marijuana. And I remember being with Sripad Siddhanta Maharaj, and actually I think he was talking about it in a Harikatha. Like, he mentioned, I think he was talking about, you know, some of the four regular principles, because we had a lot of new people in the room. It was a program at my place a while back. And there are people in the room that I know smoked as well, other devotees, but their external image is like, no, I don't do that, you know. And then I remember like raising my hand and asking Maharaj, like, okay, Maharaj, so I smoke.
Wow.
And, you know, I know that I want to stop. And I know that I'm listening to you. And I know that I probably will not stop just because I listen to you. You know, like I'm hearing you, I'm receiving it. But I don't think that I'm going to immediately jump from one to the next. But I know that the desire is there. The desire of wanting to stop is there. And for me, I think like that transparency of being honest is actually what's going to help me stop. Like having the honesty and kind of coming to someone that I know that is way, is beyond that, it's beyond that. And letting them see me for who I am is gonna actually do something karmically, I think, where it's like when you want to change, it's kind of like people when they come into AA, the first thing that they're, told to do is to say, I am an alcoholic. So it's like that acceptance of where they're at first and being able to kind of be open. I don't mean that people have to go telling the world, but just honest with yourself about where you're at and like telling someone in confidence, I'm here, but I want to get out of it. I think really helps the process versus keeping it on the low and not ever telling, it doesn't have to be our guru, particularly sometimes the relationship might not be comfortable in that aspect, but it could be a senior devotee, or it could be a shiksha, or someone that is way beyond that, is not doing the same monkey things that you're doing or I'm doing. And letting them know where you're at and being honest so that, even if you're not certain you'll make that shift immediately, there's just something magical, I think, that happens about that honesty of like, this is where I'm at and this is where I want to be. And like, here you can see me for who I am, like, open heart, transparency. And I definitely think there's a magic that happens by that potency that happens. So I would recommend people to find, find someone they can be more honest with about where they're at and where they want to be, to help them out of that. Because if we just keep it a secret, it's a little harder to come out of that cycle, a little harder to come out of those karmic attachments, the more we aren't fully authentic and honest with ourselves or others about it.
Yeah. You couldn't be more right. I think it is definitely difficult to sometimes be our truest, authentic, and most genuine selves, because there's a certain image, especially with social media, you can sort of create the image, right? You can create this persona about yourself and only show the world, and only maybe those intimate personalities that may know you personally know the type of person that you are. They may not want to go on, social media and like reveal the whole truth to the world, but you can sort of put on a front, so to speak, to all the people who don't know you so well. But I think it's really good and strong advice, is to find someone who's kind of like your confidant, who you can sort of just be like an accountability coach. Like, hey, this is where I'm at. I just want to be vulnerable with you. This is who this person is at this moment in time. And just to be able to offer that and just to say it out loud, like you said with Alcoholics Anonymous, just to accept kind of where you are, check your own pulse. Like, we say between the Ekadashis, like, see if you've made advancement from one Ekadashi to another. And, even as devotees, especially those who are initiated, I read this the other day that the My Gurudev put out, that, it's not that Gurudev does not know what you're doing.
Right.
You cannot hide anything from Guru. You cannot hide from Krishna. So truly it is not what you're necessarily giving, but it's what you're holding back. And so, we have to truly be authentic and transparent as much as possible. Be honest with ourselves first and foremost before we're honest with the rest of the world.
I feel like that's what they're there for. If we're going to see them and just put on this external image and we're not really actually revealing our hearts to them and our anarthas to them and what we want to like go through, then how, of course we can still receive their help through Hari Kirtan and japa and everything that's coming through us. But when we have that direct one-on-one association or connection and we know we're struggling with these things, it's like, I feel like if we're honest with them, then we get their mercy, and then it will help us. Like the Srila Siddhanta Maharaj, he actually appreciated my honesty, because he's like, I know there's other people in the room that do it too. And I don't remember all the things he said, but I remember that he was just saying like, just continue chanting. And little by little, your taste will change. And little by little, these things will fall off, and sometimes we don't have to, of course, he also reminded me that I am breaking one of the, regulations and that can be offensive. But the fact that I am being honest about where I'm at and knowing I want to change, that's a different relationship. I think that happens with that versus being dishonest and
or justifying the action.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remember him just telling me that, little by little, taste will go, taste will change, keep chanting, and it did over time. So,
yeah, that's very, very special. And you said exactly the thing is that by being honest with these advanced personalities, then it opens up sort of the floodgates of mercy, whether from our own guru, if our guru has disappeared from our external vision and they're acting in the form of a Siksha Guru to us, or also, in the form of them being a Siksha Guru, even if our Gurudev is physically manifest. So I think it's really, really beautiful. And I'm very grateful to you for sharing all that you shared. I'm very grateful to just hear from you. I think I wish that this conversation happened sooner. But you're kind of the first one in maybe in 2022. I don't know that I've done a Vedic Health Collective the latter part of this year. I don't think I have done one really. So you're I guess the first of 2022. But you're such a wealth of knowledge. You're a beautiful person. You're doing amazing things. You're the founder of a great movement, and I know that it's going to be successful. You're on your way to motherhood. You're going to be a great mom, and I'm just so grateful for you coming on and sharing your wisdom and enlightening the rest of us, and enlightening me especially onto all of these different aspects of healing arts and your connection with Bhakti, and how these are acting as additives for you and not in no way substituting or replacing Krishna consciousness in your life. So I'm very, very grateful. Stick around. I just want to say goodbye to the live stream world, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, and
May I just close with one thing for anyone?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So, especially if there are devotees watching or anyone who's watching, like I said, sometimes we might want to pursue some of these modalities, but there's a little fear behind it. And so I would love to open up that space. And if you want to get on a consultation call and talk a little deeper about how this could support your Bhakti path in the sense of, getting you to at least be more one-pointed so that you can be focused on Bhakti. But let's say you're not feeling that you're there yet and you have other things that are distracting your mind or physical health or things like that. I would love to get on a consultation call with anyone who's listening. It's complimentary. So you can contact me on Instagram, Golden Healing Arts, just the way it sounds like, spelled correctly. And or if you know me personally, you can reach out to me if you have my phone number or if you have me on any other social media platform. And I'd love to talk deeper with you about things that can maybe help and serve your life. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Narayani. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'll be sharing that too on different groups as well. So be sharing the whole interview. But yeah, thank you so much again. And I wish you all a very wonderful Sunday. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.